Out here in the shop today. I have made a transmission mount. I didn't make a video on it. It's super basic. 2L brackets, cross brace, bolted in. But I have to relocate the shifter because in the stock position it would just literally never fit. So what I'm doing today is I'm going to cut off this piece, which is what this actual shifter itself bolts to. Cut this off of this bracket. I'm going to try and slim this bracket down and slide it all together to where this will fit lower and a little bit more to the right to sit more like right there. And then we're gonna make a little relocation shifter like I had on the 240. And also I'm gonna have to bend the rods to go up and then forward, because originally they just went straight forward because it was sitting so high. So now they're gonna have to go up and forward. So I'm gonna cut this and see what we're working with. Alright guys, so if you look up underneath here, that's the original mount, which doesn't mount to this, it mounts to the bracket for this. So as you can see, we really just don't have very much room to work with. That's about where it should really be, because that lever at the top moves to the left when you shift into first and reverse. So right about there is about as high as I can possibly go. But obviously there's no way to bolt that top one. Maybe I could do these bottom two, but even then this one has a bolt stuck in it. We have to try and get that one out. So I'm really not quite sure how I'm gonna do it yet. But the other option is move it back like that. So we're gonna see if I can come up with a bracket for that. Alright guys, so after a lot of frustration, and this is what I came up with. Not only has one bolt in it, but it's gonna sit just like that, basically right next to that. All the rods are gonna have to go way up and forward, but we're gonna figure that out later. I believe it sits maybe a little bit more, no, it sits further back than it did before. Couldn't really go up anymore, and this was the only way to keep these bolts accessible that hold it on while it's out of the car. So we're gonna weld this in. I had to make a little filler piece for the front. I'm gonna weld all this together, fit it back, then I'm gonna take a look at the rods and see just how far off we are. Alright guys, so as you can see, that is not going anywhere. We laid some freaking hot welds on there. Same with the back side. That one was fucked up from when I tacked it, so I just did what I could. Fat welds on there now. So we can assemble this again on the transmission once it cools down, and we can see what we need to do with the linkages. Alright guys, so as you can see, this is the shifter, excuse me, in its final position. So it sits lower now, and it's also right next to the output shaft, which moves it further back closer to my hole, which means we'll have easier time using a relocation bracket, which if we look, this is the relocation bracket off the 240. Clearly the 240 had a much shorter tunnel, so there's that. But if we put this in here, it's actually pretty close. So it's gonna have to come back a little bit more and then go up a longer rod, but that's actually not that bad. Yeah, that's not too terrible, so we can work with that. The only thing is it looks like this might not work. Probably will. There's a pin in here, that's why they're not moving, by the way. So let's take a look at the shifter. I started mocking up the rods. So this is the rod for the front one here, which if you look, this trans tunnel is probably gonna need a slight bit of massaging, but not very much, nothing close to the 240. I really don't wanna affect this tunnel too much. That's why I didn't cut it out. Well, one, because it's already painted, and two, because this car is something I'm building for like years to come. So if in 3 years and like, or even next year, like I want to do an LS swap, but I don't want to keep the T10, and I go like T56, then my giant hammered out or cut out and welded out trans tunnel is pointless, and I'd rather not get into that. So I want to keep a stock tunnel. All right, guys. So we got the transmission out. I'm gonna start working on the rods. I just picked up this tubing, which is the same size as the reverse and the other shorter rod that's in the vise there, so I can extend these and sleeve them. I'm still gonna try and notch these and just slip these out of this piece here and then re-weld them further out. That's my plan. So, but for now, it's gonna be a lot easier to try and bend these to fit with the transmission on the bench. So I'm gonna bolt the cross member up, because that's the reverse rod has to clear that. So that'll give me that, and I'll be able to bend everything right here, and it'll be a lot easier. Alright guys, so obviously I haven't welded this yet, but I mocked it up and pinned it in. I'm starting with this middle one. No real reason, I just decided to start with it. So this one's supposed to mount on the back side here, the front side of this middle lever. I'm going to double check in a second to be sure. Now I think I have enough bend here. If not, I can add a little bit more. But if you notice, I also ran the adjuster out so that it was in the middle of the thread, so that way I can move it either way. If you were to weld this up and you had the adjustment maxed out one way, you wouldn't be able to move it out anymore, which isn't good. So I also cut a slightly longer one. Originally I cut this tube, which still went over both ends, but it left a lot of surface area inside, or like over the rods, not covered. So this way this will cover the rod more and give it more support. So I'm gonna tack this up, double check that it all moves. Alright guys, so I'm not gonna lie, I was really dreading this part of the project, but I just whipped up this one as well, and it's honestly going pretty easy. Once again, I left plenty of room for adjustment, as you can see, and they're welded in there pretty good. You can see the discoloration. Not the prettiest thing in the world. I don't really like MIGging these things because like, you can't really make them look that pretty. I wish I knew how to TIG for stuff like this. But I'm gonna get started on this last one, and like I said, my plan is to try and cut these crimps out, which I hope is possible. And if not, I'm just gonna have to like cut these rods out from like the middle here, because this is the only spot that should be crimped, and then use that piece over there to make a whole new long sheath. But we're gonna try and reuse this one and just weld these shut. Alright guys, so everything's welded up. I tried to save this piece here, but what I didn't realize is this must have been slipped on before the rod was bent, because the rod was actually one piece inside of here. This was just reinforcement because it was the longest rod of the bunch. And after I cut it, tried to cut the rod without completely cutting this, it pretty much cut it so much it just flexed anyway, so it's not really worth keeping. So I used a new piece and welded it in, but we have a small problem. Luckily it's fixable, but I'm going to show you guys now. So if you notice when I shift this, I'm going to try to, so we'll put it over here to first. I think that was reverse. First gear. Now if you notice what's happening, I don't think you can see. The top of the rod's actually hitting the other shift lever for third and fourth. Now the same thing happens third and fourth, shifts pretty much fine. Reverse, which is pretty hard to get into, so I'm probably not gonna be able to. There you go. Reverse does the same exact thing. So luckily we left a good amount of adjustment. What I'm gonna do is increase the bend here, and then bend here where the threads are back up, so that they're all parallel and they don't have this steep angle that's causing them to interfere. Alright guys, so as you can see, I re-bent these to come down and then kind of flare back out. This one as well. It actually bent a little bit right there by accident, but it didn't kink the tubing, so no problem. Now, let me just mention this real quick. This one is extremely sloppy. It is clipped in, but there's no bushing. These have little like slide-on bushings that slip on that take up that gap. It fell off when it was apart. It's my fault for not putting the pin back in. But I'm going to order a new set for the trans anyway to tighten everything up before it goes back in. But here we are in reverse now. If we look, it does appear that reverse might be slightly hitting the first and second shaft, but I don't think it actually is. And even if it is, we can clearance that with the flap disc and take it off the tab. But there it is in reverse. Pull out of reverse. Now in case you guys aren't familiar with the 4-speed, you go lean to the left first, second, seamlessly. I had to clearance the back a little bit because it's very close to the case. So first and second, then you're gonna come up, that's third, we're locked into third, back to fourth, and then neutral. So everything's actually working just like it should, like it's actually shifting extremely well. Reverse, if you guys don't have one of these, is literally just hard to get to. You have to rock it over twice to get to it. But anyway, next thing I'm going to do is hammer the tunnel a little bit because this rod needs a little bit of clearance. Not very much. There's a bump out in the tunnel right in this area. So light hammering there. Then I'm going to put this back in the car and we're going to work on the shifter itself and extending this to in the car. Alright guys, so once again I'm a terrible YouTuber and didn't film this, but this is a piece of solid 1/2-inch rod. Stainless. Well, cheap stainless it seems like. But I bent it up and I'll show you when I get underneath, but got all the gears, that's reversed. First, second, third, and fourth. I just have to cut it down to right there because clearly this is way too tall. Like it's a little obnoxious. But we're gonna cut it down some. And that also kind of shorten up how far we have to move it. Because up here it's pretty far, and down here is a little bit less. So we're gonna pull this out and cut it right now. And then we're gonna figure out. Alright guys, so here it is welded in. A bit of spatter has to be ground off. I literally just used the original piece I made a year ago. Cut off the flat end that the shifter used to bolt to and welded this on. And this is, I mean, plenty solid. I heated that up with the torch and it's plenty solid. Everything works really good actually. And that's just gonna bolt in like normal. This will go up. I'm probably gonna find a way to attach. I'm not sure. I'm gonna try and cut threads on this, and then the shift knob will be able to screw on. Alright guys, so I got the car back on the ground and clearly the shifter is done, this is done, and I was originally going to come in here and make any type of bracket that I needed before I pulled the motor out and got this ready to be painted, but really there's not going to be any brackets, so I'm putting all the electronics inside right behind here, but I do have to cut this out before the motor comes out, and that should be the last time it has to come out before it goes in for like the final assembly. So I'm just going to mark this out with the marker and then plasma cut it where I think it needs to be cut, which is a little bit tricky, but that should work pretty good. Alright guys, so clearly we got it pretty roughly cut. It needs a good bit of flap disking to really clean it up. Obviously, it's not perfect. And the reason it's slightly offset is because the distributor is also slightly offset. But we're going to test fit this and see how it works. Alright guys, so here's the final test fit before this motor comes out to get work done and this bay gets prepped to get painted. But as you can see, the top has to be trimmed up, no big deal, I can do that. But the sides clear pretty good. It looks like there's gonna be room between the arm, which is great. So I'm gonna flap this, cut the top a little bit higher and clean it up. But otherwise we're good. So I can drop this motor, pull it out, and that's gonna be it. That's it for this video, guys. I should say also, I got my new harmonic balancer pulley in, my crank pulley. And it's nice, cast aluminum. I don't know if you can see, but this thing is like over a 1/2 inch thick on the back, I guess because it's cast aluminum. And I just bought bolts that are now too short because I didn't realize it'd be that thick, but no big deal. So I'm going to pull this out, and that's going to be it, guys. Next time, we're going to be either working on the motor or maybe the bay. Probably the motor first because this car is probably going to get pushed outside so I can work on the motor. I have heads. I have to clean it up and make it all pretty. I have a new intake. I have to do headers and stuff like that as well, but that'll be once it's back in the car. But for now, we're just going to do intake and heads, which is going to be sweet. Got some cool shit for that, and we're also going to shed some weight. So look out for that, and I'll see you guys next time.